The royal arena of Valoran gleamed under the twin suns of Cathar, its massive amphitheater filled to capacity with the elite of the Valoran Empire. Today marked the centennial Challenge of the 100, a tradition that had defined their civilization for millennia. The air vibrated with anticipation as nobles dressed in shimmering fabrics of impossible colors jostled for the best views. In the shadows beneath the arena, Silas adjusted the crude leather armor that barely protected his vital organs. The Earthborn captive had been forced into this tournament after his transport vessel had been captured in Valoran space. For 6 months, he had trained in the holding pits, learning to fight with weapons he had never seen before arriving on this alien world. "You'll die quickly," the Valoran guard sneered, his translucent skin revealing the flow of purple blood beneath. 99 have fallen before you. You'll be the 100th sacrifice." Silas said nothing. He had learned that silence was his only defense against the psychological warfare the Valorans waged against their slaves. His fingers traced the scar on his neck where they had implanted the translator. At least he could understand their taunts now. Above, seated in the royal box, Tyessa watched with practiced disinterest. As the daughter of Korath, the battlemaster who organized these spectacles, she had witnessed countless humans die in the arena. Her father had taught her that humans were an inferior species, meant only for labor and entertainment. Yet something about this particular human had caught her attention during the preliminary rounds. Unlike the others who had fought with desperate rage, this one moved with calculated precision. "Daughter, pay attention," Korath whispered, his ceremonial armor glinting with embedded crystals that signified his rank. "Emperor Vorak honors us with his presence today." Tyessa bowed her head in acknowledgement, but found her eyes drawn back to the arena floor as the gates opened. The crowd roared as Silas emerged, looking small and fragile compared to the towering warriors who awaited him. 100 of Valoran's finest soldiers, each armed with energy weapons and force shields, formed a circle around the lone human. The battlemaster rose, his voice amplified across the arena. "Let the challenge of the 100 commence. May the glory of Valoran shine through the blood of the unworthy." The first warrior charged, his energy blade humming with deadly intent. Silas waited until the last possible moment before sidestepping, using the Valoran's momentum against him. In a move that shocked the audience, he managed to disarm the warrior and drive the energy blade through its owner's armor. Purple blood splattered across the red sand. A murmur rippled through the crowd. This was unexpected. The second and third warriors attacked simultaneously. Silas dropped to the ground, rolling beneath their sweeping blades before striking upward with precision. 2 more bodies fell. "What is this?" Emperor Vorak leaned forward, his interest piqued. "This slave fights with unusual skill." "A momentary advantage, Your Majesty," Korath assured him, though worry creased his brow. "The 100 will overwhelm him shortly." But as minutes stretched into an hour, and then 2, the impossible continued to unfold. Silas fought with a combination of earth combat techniques unknown to the Valorans and adaptations he had developed during his captivity. He used fallen warriors' weapons and shields, turning the Valorans' superior technology against them. His body was covered in wounds, blood, both his and alien, turning his skin into a canvas of determination. Tyessa could not look away. The human moved like no fighter she had ever seen, each motion efficient and purposeful. When he was surrounded, he created chaos among his attackers, causing them to impede each other. When isolated, he struck with devastating precision. By the 3rd hour, 50 warriors lay dead or incapacitated. The crowd had fallen into a stunned silence, broken only by gasps when Silas executed particularly brilliant maneuvers. This was no longer entertainment, they were witnessing history. "Father," Tyessa whispered, "no one has ever defeated more than 37 in the challenge." Korath's face had hardened into a mask of fury. "This makes mockery of our traditions." As the 99th warrior fell, the arena had become so quiet that the sound of labored breathing, Silas's desperate gulps for air, echoed off the stone walls. Only one opponent remained, the captain of the Imperial Guard, a veteran of countless battles. Silas stood swaying, his body pushed beyond normal human endurance. Blood dripped from dozens of wounds, and his left arm hung useless at his side. The captain approached cautiously, aware that underestimating this human had cost 99 of his comrades their lives. Their final battle lasted only minutes, but to those watching, it seemed to unfold in slow motion. When Silas finally drove his stolen blade through the captain's chest, a collective gasp rose from 30,000 throats. The impossible had happened. A human slave had defeated 100 Valoran warriors. Emperor Vorak stood, his expression unreadable behind his ceremonial mask. Tradition dictated that any warrior who survived the challenge of the 100 would be granted freedom and a boon of their choosing. No slave had ever survived, let alone triumphed. The tradition had been established 3 centuries ago when a noble Valoran had accomplished the feat, choosing the hand of a rival house's daughter as his reward. "Human!" The emperor's voice boomed across the silent arena. "You have done what none believed possible. By the ancient laws of Valoran, you are granted your freedom and may claim a prize of your choosing." Silas, barely conscious, looked up at the royal box. His translator struggled to process the emperor's formal dialect, but he understood enough. Freedom. The word he had dreamed of for months. "I claim my freedom," he managed to say, his voice ragged. Nothing more. The emperor tilted his head, confused. "You must claim a prize beyond freedom. It is tradition." Silas shook his head. "Freedom is enough." Murmurs of outrage rippled through the crowd. No one refused the emperor's generosity. It was an insult to valor and honor. Korath stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the human does not understand our ways. Perhaps I could suggest—" "Silence." Emperor Vorak raised a hand. "The human has earned the right to choose." He considered for a moment, then pointed at Thaisa. "Take my battlemaster's daughter. She is of noble blood and will bring honor to your line." Thaisa froze, her heart suddenly racing. Being offered as a prize was not uncommon in Valoran culture, but never had a human been offered a noble bride. The implications were staggering. Silas looked at the young Valoran woman, seeing the shock on her face. Despite his exhaustion and pain, he understood what was happening. They were trying to force him into their system, to make his victory fit within their traditions. "No," he said, louder this time. "I claim only my freedom, not a person. People aren't prizes." The arena erupted in chaos. Nobles shouted in outrage. Guards moved toward Silas, uncertain whether to protect or arrest him. Emperor Vorak remained standing, his mask hiding what must have been fury at this public defiance. Thaisa stared at the human who had just refused her. In Valoran culture, this was the greatest insult imaginable. Yet something in his words, "people aren't prizes," resonated in a way she had never experienced before. "Take him to the healing chambers," Emperor Vorak finally ordered. "We will discuss his unusual request when he is recovered." As guards escorted the barely conscious Silas from the arena, Thaisa caught his eye for just a moment. In that brief connection, something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, that both were caught in systems not of their making. Later that night, as healers worked to repair Silas's broken body with advanced Valoran technology, Thaisa slipped into the medical facility. She had used her father's access codes to bypass security, a treasonous act that could cost her her position and possibly her life. "You refused me," she said without preamble as she approached his healing pod. Silas, partially sedated but conscious, focused on her with effort. "Not you. The idea of owning you. Ownership is not how we see such arrangements," she replied. Though even as she said it, she realized the falsehood. Of course it was ownership, dressed in the language of tradition and honor. "Why are you here?" Silas asked, his voice stronger as the healing process accelerated. "The court is in turmoil. My father and the emperor are discussing how to salvage honor from your refusal. Some suggest executing you would resolve the matter." Silas closed his eyes briefly. "So much for freedom." They cannot execute you openly. It would violate the sacred laws of the challenge. But accidents happen to freed slaves all the time. She hesitated, then added, I can help you escape. His eyes snapped open. Why would you help me? Because you made me see something today that I've been blind to my entire life. She moved closer to the pod. When you said people aren't prizes, no Valoran would ever think such a thing, let alone say it publicly. Before Silas could respond, an alarm sounded in the distance. Tyessa tensed. They're coming. My father must have discovered my absence. Making a split-second decision, she activated the release mechanism on the healing pod. You're not fully healed, but you can move. Follow me if you want to live. Silas stumbled from the pod, his body aching but functional. The Valoran healing technology had accelerated his recovery remarkably. He followed Tyessa through a series of maintenance corridors, moving deeper into the massive complex that housed the arena. Where are we going? He whispered as they paused at an intersection. The Undercity. It's where most freed slaves end up anyway. You'll blend in there until I can arrange transport off-planet. They descended through levels of decreasing opulence, the gleaming metal and crystal of the upper city giving way to concrete and rusted steel. Eventually, they emerged into a warren of narrow streets filled with beings from dozens of worlds, most bearing the distinctive scar of translator implants. Tyessa pulled a hood over her distinctive Valoran features. My presence here would cause complications. The freed slaves don't love the daughter of the battle master. Yet here you are, risking everything. Silas studied her with newfound curiosity. You're not what I expected. Neither are you, human. She led him to a decrepit building and knocked in a specific pattern. The door opened to reveal an older human man with weathered features. Jonas, Tyessa nodded in greeting. This is Silas. He needs sanctuary. Jonas's eyes widened in recognition. The arena fighter, the one who defeated the 100. He looked at Silas with something approaching reverence. Word travels fast, even to the Undercity. Come in, quickly. Inside, the building revealed itself to be much more than its exterior suggested. Hidden technology hummed beneath patched walls, and a dozen beings of various species moved with purpose through what appeared to be a command center. What is this place? Silas asked, taking in the star charts and communication equipment. The beginning of something, Jonas replied cryptically. Something you just became the face of, whether you wanted to or not. Over the next days, as Silas recovered his strength, he learned that Jonas was the coordinator of a growing resistance movement. Slaves and former slaves from dozens of worlds had been organizing, waiting for the right moment to challenge the Valoran Empire's practice of sentient trafficking. Your victory in the arena wasn't just unprecedented, it was symbolic. Jonas explained as they shared a meal of synthesized protein. You've become a rallying point. Even now, the story is spreading through the Empire, the human who defeated 100 warriors and then refused to participate in their system of ownership. Tyessa visited when she could, using increasingly complex methods to evade detection. Each time, she brought information about the palace's response to Silas's disappearance. They're claiming you died from your injuries, she reported during one visit. It preserves the honor of the 100 while explaining your absence. My father suspects I helped you, but he has no proof. You're taking an enormous risk, Silas told her, concerned. If they discover what you're doing, then I'll join the ranks of those who chose conscience over convenience, she replied with surprising steel in her voice. I cannot unsee what I've seen, Silas. My people's traditions are built on suffering. As weeks passed, Silas became more involved in the Resistance's operations. His unique perspective as both an outsider and someone who had experienced the worst of Valoran oppression proved valuable in planning. Meanwhile, his connection with Tyessa deepened beyond their initial wary alliance. You could have had anything after the arena, she said one night as they worked over tactical displays. Why did you only ask for freedom? Silas paused, considering his answer carefully. On Earth, we have a long shameful history of treating people as property, centuries of slavery and oppression. We learned, painfully, imperfectly, that freedom isn't something that should be granted as a gift. It's the natural state of all sentient beings. A beautiful ideal, Thaisa murmured. An ideal worth fighting for, Silas replied, his hand brushing against hers. Their moment of connection was interrupted by Jonas bursting into the room. Assassination squad, he gasped. Imperial Special Forces. They're combing the Undercity, building by building. They found us, Thaisa paled. But how? It doesn't matter. Silas moved to a weapons cache, selecting a modified Valorant energy rifle. We need to evacuate. Too late. Jonas shook his head. They've established a perimeter. Our sensors detected them moments ago. Silas thought quickly. Then we set a trap. This building has multiple levels and access points. We can use that. As the resistance fighters scrambled to defensive positions, Silas outlined a plan. Using the building's infrastructure, they rigged a series of cascading ambushes designed to separate and isolate the Imperial forces. Your combat experience is showing, Jonas commented as they worked. I was a military engineer before being captured. Silas admitted, designed defensive systems for off-world colonies. When the Imperial forces breached the outer doors, they encountered not the disorganized resistance they expected, but a carefully orchestrated defense. Electrified floors activated selectively. Barriers dropped to separate squads, and precision fire from hidden positions took a devastating toll. In the control room, Silas monitored the assault through surveillance systems. They're pulling back to regroup, he reported, but they'll return with heavier weapons. We need to break through their perimeter, Jonas said. I have evacuation ships standing by 2 sectors away. I'll create a diversion, Silas decided. Something to draw their attention while the rest of you escape. That's suicide, Thaisa protested, having arrived minutes earlier through a secret passage. Thaisa! Silas stared in shock. You shouldn't be here. The palace must be on high alert. I came as soon as I learned of the operation, she explained hurriedly. My father's private communications mentioned a cleanup operation in the Undercity. I knew what it meant. She turned to Jonas. And I brought help. From behind her emerged 3 Valorans in Imperial Guard uniforms. These are friends, she explained. Not all Valorans support the old ways. With the unexpected reinforcements, the plan changed. The disguised Valorans would escort a group of resistance members through the perimeter, claiming to have captured dissidents. Meanwhile, Silas, Thaisa, and a small team would create a distraction. The operation began smoothly, with the first group successfully penetrating the perimeter. Silas led his team toward the main Imperial command post, planning to disable their communications and sow confusion. They had nearly reached their target when disaster struck. A hidden sensor detected their approach, triggering alarms. Within seconds, they were surrounded by Imperial forces, energy weapons aimed at their position. Surrender now, ordered a commanding officer, his armor marking him as elite Imperial Guard. Silas raised his hand slowly, mind racing for a solution. Beside him, Thaisa had pulled her hood tighter, concealing her identity. If she were recognized, her fate would be worse than death. I surrender, Silas called out. Let the others go. I'm the one you want, the arena fighter. The officer paused, clearly surprised. The arena fighter is dead. Clearly not. Silas stepped forward, drawing attention away from the others. Take me to Battlemaster Korath. He'll want to see me personally. As the guards moved to apprehend him, chaos erupted from an unexpected quarter. Thaisa threw back her hood and stepped forward. Stand down, in the name of House Korath. The guards faltered, recognizing her instantly. Their momentary confusion was all the opening Silas's team needed. Energy weapons fired, not to kill, but to disable, creating a corridor of escape. Run! Silas shouted, grabbing Thaisa's arm. Together, they fled through the Undercity, pursued by increasingly disorganized Imperial forces. They eventually reached a maintenance shaft that led to the upper city, emerging in an industrial sector far from the palace. The evacuation ships. Silas gasped, catching his breath. Will they make it? Jonas knows what he's doing, Thaisa assured him, but you and I, we can never go back to the Undercity. They'll lock it down completely now. And you can never return to the palace. Silas realized, you've committed high treason. Thaisa's expression showed no regret. I made my choice weeks ago. Silas, when I first helped you escape, they found temporary refuge in an abandoned processing facility, using Thaisa's knowledge of Imperial patrol patterns to avoid detection. As night fell over the city, they watched from a high window as increased security forces moved through the streets below. What happens now? Silas asked softly. Now, we become the spark. Thaisa replied. The assassination attempt failing will only fuel the resistance. My public defection will cause ripples throughout the noble houses. Some will condemn me, but others, those who have quietly questioned our traditions, might find their courage. It's not just about slaves anymore, is it? Silas realized. This is about changing your entire society. It always was, she admitted. Jonas and the others have been planning this for years. They needed symbols, rallying points. You became one in the arena. I became another when I chose to help you. Their conversation was interrupted by a distant rumble that quickly grew to a roar. Looking up, they saw massive ships descending through Kithar's atmosphere, the Imperial Space Fleet, called back from the frontier. This is unprecedented, Thaisa breathed. The home fleet never deploys over the capital. They're not taking any chances, Silas observed grimly. They're treating this as a full-scale insurrection. Then perhaps we should give them one, came a voice from the shadows. They spun to find Jonas standing there, accompanied by a dozen resistance fighters. The evacuation was successful, he reported. Over 300 of our people made it to the ships. They're regrouping at the sanctuary moon. How did you find us? Silas asked, embracing his friend in relief. Thaisa's security implant, Jonas explained. All nobles have them. We've been tracking it since she first came to us, with her knowledge. Thaisa nodded. I couldn't risk leading Imperial forces to your hideout accidentally. The implant lets Jonas's people know if I'm being followed. And now, Jonas continued, it's letting us track a much larger movement. The slaves are rising. Silas, in districts across the city, then in cities across the planet. The story of the arena fighter and the battlemaster's daughter who chose freedom over privilege, it's spreading like wildfire. Over the following days, what began as isolated incidents escalated into coordinated rebellion. The resistance had been planning this moment for years, establishing sleeper cells throughout the empire. Silas found himself thrust into a leadership role, his military background and status as the arena fighter, making him a natural figurehead. Thaisa proved equally valuable, her intimate knowledge of imperial protocols and noble house politics, allowing the resistance to anticipate and counter government responses. Together, they formed a partnership that became legendary among the rebels, the human warrior and the Valoran princess who defied an empire. The conflict came to a head when the resistance managed to capture a light cruiser from the Imperial fleet. With Silas commanding a hastily trained crew, they used the ship to disable the planetary defense grid long enough for the main resistance fleet, a collection of stolen, modified, and allied vessels, to enter the system. Admiral Vex, commander of the Imperial Home Fleet, deployed his forces to intercept. This is madness. He communicated to the approaching rebels. You cannot hope to defeat the full might of the Valoran Armada. We don't need to defeat you. Silas responded from the command deck of the captured cruiser, now renamed Retribution. We only need to show the Empire that the age of slavery is ending. The space battle that followed was unlike anything in Valoran history. The Imperial ships, designed for precision and coordination, struggled against the unpredictable tactics of the Resistance fleet. Ships piloted by former slaves from a dozen worlds used maneuvers that defied conventional military doctrine. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Vex watched in growing consternation as his carefully arranged battle formation disintegrated into chaos. "Who is commanding these ships?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "No ragtag collection of slaves should be able to execute such maneuvers." "Sir," the officer responded hesitantly, "we're detecting communication patterns consistent with Earth military protocols. The human from the arena, he's implementing Earth fleet tactics, but adapted to our technology." Vex studied the tactical display with newfound respect. "Clever. Our defenses are designed to counter known threats. This human brings something entirely new." The battle reached its climax when Silas, in a daring maneuver, took the retribution directly toward the Imperial flagship. "Admiral Vex," he broadcast on an open channel, "your ships are surrounded, you've lost 20% of your fleet, and we've barely begun. End this now, before more Valoran blood is spilled." "You speak of Valoran blood?" Vex responded incredulously. "You, who slaughtered 100 of our finest warriors." "I fought for my freedom in your arena, according to your rules," Silas countered. "Now I'm fighting for the freedom of all sentient beings. The difference is, this time, I'm giving you a choice." Beside him on the bridge, Tyessa stepped forward. "Admiral Vex, this is Tyessa of House Korath. You served with my father for 20 cycles. You know him to be an honorable man, but one bound by tradition. I ask you now to look beyond tradition to justice. The practice of slavery dishonors the true glory of Valoran." A long silence followed her words. Finally, Vex's voice returned, somber. "Lady Tyessa, your words. They echo thoughts I have long suppressed. Perhaps it is time for Valoran to evolve beyond certain traditions." The ceasefire that followed was tenuous at first, with both sides maintaining battle readiness while negotiations commenced. The resistance demanded immediate emancipation of all slaves, recognition of a new interspecies alliance, and amnesty for all who had participated in the uprising. Emperor Vorak initially rejected these terms outright, but as news of the space battle spread through the Empire, public opinion began to shift. Many Valorans, particularly the younger generation, had grown uncomfortable with the practice of sentient slavery. The story of Silas and Tyessa, now spreading across 100 worlds, crystallized these feelings into a movement. When several noble houses publicly announced their support for the resistance, Emperor Vorak was forced to reconsider. After 3 days of tense negotiation, he agreed to meet with the resistance leaders on Nexus Prime, a neutral world known for its diplomatic facilities. Silas and Tyessa led the resistance delegation, accompanied by Jonas and representatives from a dozen formerly enslaved species. Emperor Vorak arrived with Admiral Vex, Battlemaster Korath, and a contingent of noble house leaders. The meeting began in strained silence, centuries of imperial tradition facing the revolutionary force of freedom. It was Korath who spoke first, addressing not the resistance leaders, but his own daughter. "Tyessa," his voice carried the weight of betrayal. "How could you forsake your heritage, your family? For this?" He gestured dismissively toward Silas. "Father," she replied evenly, "I forsook nothing of value. Our heritage is more than the subjugation of others. Our family honor can only be elevated by standing for justice." "You speak of justice," Emperor Vorak interjected. "Yet you have brought chaos to a system that has maintained peace for millennia." "Peace for whom?" Silas challenged. "Not for the billions held in bondage, not for the world stripped of resources to fuel Valoran expansion. The Empire has brought order and civilization," Vorak began. "The Empire has brought suffering," Jonas interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. "I was born on a mining world where the average life expectancy of a slave was 20 Earth years. We died in darkness so that Valoran cities could shine with light." For hours, the debate continued, moving from recrimination to negotiation. Admiral Vex proved an unexpected ally, presenting data showing that imperial resources spent controlling slave populations could be better utilized in cooperation with free worlds. The future of Valoran lies not in domination, but in alliance, he argued to a gradually receptive audience. By the third day of talks, a framework emerged: immediate freedom for all slaves within imperial territory, a transitional government including representatives from all sentient species, and a truth commission to document the abuses of the past. When Emperor Vorak finally signed the accord, the moment marked not just the end of negotiations, but the beginning of a new era. The Valoran Empire would transform into the Interstellar Alliance, with membership open to all worlds regardless of species or technological development. As the formal proceedings concluded, Korath approached his daughter privately. "You have changed everything," he said, his voice a mixture of resignation and reluctant admiration. "Not I alone, father," she replied gently. "Change was coming. I merely chose which side of history to stand on." "And this human?" Korath glanced toward Silas, who was deep in conversation with Admiral Vex. "You care for him?" It wasn't a question, but Thaisa answered anyway. "I do. He showed me that courage isn't about facing enemies in battle, but facing truth in oneself." Korath considered this, then surprised her by extending his hand in the traditional Valoran gesture of respect. "Then perhaps he has something to teach all of us." 5 years later, on the newly established colony world of New Harmony, Silas stood in the garden of his home, watching as children played among carefully tended earth and Valoran plants. Some of the children were human, others Valoran, and a few displayed the distinctive features of both species, a genetic possibility that scientists had once claimed impossible. "They're getting faster," Thaisa observed as she joined him, her once formal imperial attire replaced by the practical clothing of a colonial administrator. "Partha almost caught Elian that time." Silas smiled, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Human speed, Valoran endurance, they're getting the best of both worlds." "As are we all," she replied, leaning against him. The transformation of the former empire had not been without challenges. Centuries of imperial rule left deep scars, and some former slave worlds chose isolation rather than alliance. But the principles established at Nexus Prime had held firm: freedom for all sentient beings, equal representation in governance, and a commitment to healing the wounds of the past. Silas and Thaisa had chosen to help establish New Harmony rather than remain in the political spotlight. The colony represented everything they had fought for: a place where species from across the galaxy could live together as equals, learning from each other's cultures while building something entirely new. "Message from Jonas," Silas said as his communication device chimed. "The Council has approved the expansion of the educational exchange program. 10 more worlds will be participating next cycle." "Good." Thaisa nodded in satisfaction. "Education is how we prevent the mistakes of the past from recurring." As the suns began to set, casting long shadows across their garden, Silas reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from the blood-soaked sands of the arena to the peaceful fields of New Harmony. Each step had seemed impossible until taken. "What are you thinking?" Tessa asked, noting his contemplative expression. "I'm thinking about freedom," he replied. "Not just the absence of chains, but the presence of possibility." He gestured toward the playing children, the growing settlement beyond, and the stars just becoming visible in the darkening sky. "All of this exists because people dared to imagine a different future." "And fought for it," she reminded him, her hand finding his. "Never forget that part." "I couldn't possibly." Silas smiled, the scars from the arena still visible on his skin. "Some lessons leave permanent marks." As night fell fully, they called the children in for dinner. Gathered around their table, humans, Valorans, and the new generation that was both and neither, they represented a promise fulfilled: that freedom, once claimed, could transform not just individual lives but entire civilizations. And in quiet moments, when the children were asleep and the house still, Silas and Thaisa would sometimes speak of the arena, of the impossible victory that had set everything in motion. "You watched me fight 100 warriors," he would tease gently. "That's quite a first impression to live up to." "And now I won't let anyone else touch you," she would reply. echoing the phrase that had become something of a legend throughout the Alliance. Some traditions are worth keeping. In the garden outside their window, flowers from Earth and Cathar bloomed side by side, their roots intertwined in the soil of a new world. A world where no one was born into bondage, where children learned of slavery as a distant historical tragedy, and where the battlemaster's daughter and the arena fighter were remembered not just for what they destroyed, but for what they helped create.